listening to The Voice of Russia. This is Alice Lagnado. Pushkin House is the Russian cultural centre that has enjoyed a dramatic revival in the last 5 years. It's now the place to be for Russians and Russophiles in London. It has a new building in Bloomsbury, and everyday writers, musicians, artists and filmmakers, both Russians and Brits who are interested in Russia, come to the venue to show their work, give talks and concerts, and exchange views. Julian Gallant is a conductor and pianist who became the director of Pushkin House when it relaunched in 2006. I invited Julian into the studio to talk about the project. Julian, Pushkin House was first set up in the 1950s by a group of Russians who wanted to set up a politically neutral Russian cultural centre in London. People like dancer Tamara Korsavina, Sir Isaiah Berlin and many others appeared there. Then in the early 90s, Russian writers who'd moved to the West started appearing at Pushkin House, but by then most of the flats in the building had been rented out and you only had one room. So a new building was bought in Bloomsbury, wasn't it? And were you involved in that project from the start? And what was the impetus behind it?
It does go back to 1950s. All those people you've spoken about are right. And in fact, there's a history of Pushkin House from 1956 right up to the sale of the 46 Ladbroke Grove building coming out quite soon, which will be very interesting. There's one very important person needs to be mentioned in that context is Maria Kuhlmann, who was a Russian who was married to a Swiss scientist. And she was very much the instigator of that, the driving force behind the purchase of 46 Ladbroke Grove. It was purchased in 1956 and it was set up as a centre of culture, quite right. It was a levelling point. It was a meeting place. That building, obviously, it was a Victorian villa. It needed renovation. Nothing much could be done about it because the capital was locked away in the bricks and mortar. And so the building was sold in 2004 and a new building was sought and finally found in Bloomsbury. And that was purchased by the Trust in 2004 and then opened in 2006. Asked me where I came in. I actually came in, professionally speaking, I came in June 2006 as Chief Executive to the Pushkin House Trust, and I was brought in to run the new building and to run its cultural programme.
Who funded the project? Because it's quite a big undertaking.
Yes, why I'm there. I mean, the question is often why is a non-Russian in charge of a Russian cultural centre? That's a good question. I, of course, have a big experience of Russia. I've been going to Russia since 1997. I'm a musician by background, and I've worked all around Russia and parts of the former Soviet Union as a conductor. And I've also worked as an impresario, bringing Russian orchestras and ballet companies over to the UK. So I've got an experience of Russian culture and its particularities and peculiarities as well. So your other question was, who's funding it? Who's funding it? Well, that's my headache, actually. We're a cultural charity. We're a charitable foundation. We seek funding. I mean, that's what I do. I mean, that's
do you
my
have
job.
Do you have any backing from the Russian government or from other grant-making bodies in the UK?
Russian government, no. We don't have a grant from the Russian government. We do have an association with Ruski Mir, which is a cultural foundation, which is Kremlin. It's part of the Kremlin's apparatus, and we have a relationship with them. They've set up 2 rooms as library facilities in Pushkin House, and that's as far as we go with the Russian government. But with Russia, we have a relationship with with the organs of government, like the embassy, and we certainly were very open to suggestions. We've had exhibitions that have been sent over and that come to Pushkin House. We have a friendly relationship with pretty well everybody.
Now, it seems that every night at Pushkin House you've got a film, a talk, an exhibition, a concert. Did you expect when you began in 2006 that Pushkin House would become such a success? There seems to be such an explosion of Russian culture in London, and it hasn't stopped, it seems to me.
I never think about our own success because my view is that one has to go forwards all the time, that you have to think about how much better you can do, and you have to look for new avenues and new lines. But what's certainly true, absolutely right, there's an enormous amount of Russian culture in London, and there's an enormous energy out to bring culture out of Russia, to bring it to London, and we are there. What we do is we choose very carefully what we want, and we put it on, and we have a nice facility. We're a house, so we don't have rooms which take 500 people. We have rooms which take 70 or 80 people, 2 of them, and so we have a program of literature, readings, of screenings. We teach the Russian language. We have concerts. What we've got on at the moment is a play called Anastasia, which is the company called Walking Thoughts. It's in English, and it turns our large room into a theatre for the month of April. When that comes out, that room will then become once again, a venue for lots of different things, for lectures, for concerts and screenings and the like.
Are most of your visitors Russians, or is it a mix between Russians and Brits?
It's old, it's young, it's Russian, it's non-Russian. It's pretty well everybody with an interest in Russian culture. Some of our content is in Russian, okay, so that's obviously for Russians or for people who actually speak Russian very well. Most of it is in English, and if we show films, we show with subtitles.
Now, Julian, aside from Pushkin House, you started your working life as a pianist. You read music at Oxford, and since then you've performed all around the world, including in Russia at Moscow's Tchaikovsky Concert Hall and beyond. You're also chief conductor of the Russian Chamber Orchestra of London. Do you still continue your musical career?
Yes, I do. I do music at Pushkin House, and that's one of the things I can bring, sort of added value that I can bring to Pushkin House. I put on concerts there. I bring singers to Pushkin House. I did a wonderful concert recently with Mark Heller, American tenor, who'd just been in Aida at the Albert Hall, and he came and did a recital with us. And in fact, he sang Lenski Zara from Evgeny Onegin. So that's one side of it. But when I'm not at Pushkin House, I'm often travelling around in Georgia or in Russia or in Kazakhstan or lots of other countries conducting symphony orchestras or opera companies. The most fun thing I had recently, I was conducting in the Republic of Khakassia, the city of Abakan, conducting symphony orchestra there.
So you go quite far
Yes.
away. You're not just one of those people who's seen Moscow and Petersburg and that's it.
That's a long discussion. Russia, it's very important. I mean, it's, again, a core duty of ours to make sure that the people know that Russia is not just Moscow and St. Petersburg. Russia is a world, is many worlds, and many different ethnicities, many different ways of living, many different attitudes. There's a vast variety within the nation, and of course it's huge. And people need to know that. And if they knew more about that, they would understand more about Russian history, and they would understand more about why Russia is like it is now.
Do you enjoy going to those far-off regions that people here don't know about at all?
It's my life. That's what is everything to me. It's finding out what goes on there.
And is there a big appetite for music outside in Georgia, in the Caucasus, in Central Asia?
Last year I was conducting Italian opera in Kutaisi in Georgia. It was absolutely full, and the public is by and large quite young, actually. It's extraordinary. Everywhere you go in Russia, the thirst for culture is absolutely evident and paramount. And the other thing that some people regard Russia as, they talk about Russian nationalism. Whenever I go to Russia, I'm always welcomed, and people always want to find out what somebody who comes from outside Russia thinks and feels about music and life in general. So I always have a very good experience.
What about the Russian Chamber Orchestra of London, where you're chief conductor? Why is it called Russian? Is it Russian musicians, Russian music?
Russian musicians who live in London. This we formed. When I say we formed, my wife and I formed it because we knew so many musicians who were here and who liked to play together. And there is a certain, especially amongst the string playing, there's a certain cohesion, a certain unity, and a certain sort of unity of idea behind it. And so we formed the orchestra.
So are they musicians who play in other orchestras as well? And
oh yes, it's not a full-time orchestra. That would be wonderful, but that is impractical.
Have you ever worked with the biggest Russian theatres, the Mariinsky, the Bolshoi, various other conductors, or do you have any dreams of doing so?
My dream as an artist, as a conductor, is it's not to work in a particular theatre or work with a particular orchestra. It's to make really good music. That's what I dream about. And now that often involves, of course, if you can work with great musicians and great singers, of course you can make great music. So that's the way it works. I've had some wonderful experiences. I've conducted an opera Helicon in opera, which was great fun, and wonderfully sort of vibrant and innovative atmosphere there.
That's in Moscow.
In Moscow, that's where it's been outside its own building because of a renovation for several years now. I have not worked at the Bolshoi. I haven't worked at the Mariinsky, but I've been there many times. I know lots of people who are there, and of course much admire them and would love to work there. Of course, would love to. I've worked with some great Russian orchestras. I've worked with the Novaya Rossiya Orchestra, which is Yuri Beshmet's orchestra, which is a superb instrument. The musicians are absolutely tops.
And what about the practical side of bringing artists over? There have been a few issues regarding artist visas and quite strict rules from the British authorities. Do you come across that issue often?
Yes, those are practicalities and difficulties that, as a promoter and organiser, you have to be pretty well organised about. Now, in my former life as a director of ensemble productions, and that company still carries on, of course, we employed a lot of musicians from Russia, and we were always arranging work permits and visas for them, and I don't remember having any problems with it. There are difficulties, but it takes some time to get a British visa, and if someone's travelling a lot, it means that they have to leave their passport for some time with the consulate. So, of course, that has to be arranged well in advance. It takes a lot of organised thinking. And I hope that things will become easier. There is a movement now that I believe very soon that things will become easier for visiting artists, and that's going to kick in quite soon. And that as regards to work permits and sponsors and the getting of visas. So there is positive news there, but there's a long way to go. It is important that Britain brings artists over from Russia and from Ukraine. That is important because that's not just about bringing good people over. That's about developing cultural ties, and that's about developing the bond between the nations, and that really counts.
And have you any ideas about future plans for Pushkin House or other projects that you might want to drop a hint about to our listeners?
Well, Pushkin House, Pushkin House has now been running for over 5 years, and we're publishing a book quite soon, a commemorative book about the last 60 years, but there'll be a big section on what's happened in the last 5 years. And I had the fun of going through the last 5 years and sifting through what had happened there, and so I was able to see really remarkable how much has actually happened there. I mean, there were over something like 1,500 events that had happened, and to see all the wonderful people who come, like actors like Valentin Gaft and Ralph Fiennes, writers, directors, Andrei Konchalovsky was there, and numerous other people. It just lots and lots and lots of activity. So that was great, and that all happened within our four walls. But I think the time is coming now when we want to start doing things more outside our own four walls. It started already because some of our lecturing program is happening outside Pushkin House, and we're developing a program to teach Russian language through Russian art in schools. You may not be aware just how little Russian is taught in schools in the UK, and that's one thing we can really help with. So we're going to develop that through history programs and through art programs to get the Russian language into the secondary school system. So I'm looking forward to that. What we want to do also, we have it as a sort of unwritten guiding principle that we want to break down all kinds of stereotypical thinking about Russia. There is stereotypical thinking about Russia out there. We want to
sure, bears in the streets.
Yes,
and
exactly, and all the rest of it about vodka, lifestyle, and so on. So we want to break down that thinking and liberate thinking about Russia, and so we want to concentrate on current affairs. So within the next year, we will be doing a lot more about Russian current affairs, looking at Russia's politics, history, and what's going on there, but from a totally neutral point of view.
That was Julian Gallant, director of Pushkin House, talking to me, Alice Lagnado. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. Stay tuned.